Hi, my name is Joel Rosenthal, and I'm currently serving as the Associate Chair of Graduate Studies and Research in our Department of Chemistry at the University of Delaware. Thanks for tuning into this video, where I just want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about the structure and timeline for doctoral studies in our department. So I'd like to start simply by giving you a feeling for the philosophy and priorities that back up most of what we do as far as graduate studies in our department go. So our graduate program is really designed to provide our students with technical, critical thinking and problem-solving skills that they're going to need to succeed both professionally and personally once they finish their time with us here at the University of Delaware. And we accomplish that by emphasizing several things. The first thing we do is that we try to emphasize and use practical coursework that's highly flexible and fully tailored to enhance each student's foundation in the specific areas in which they will specialize. So we try to avoid cookie cutter courses and set curricula for all students, no matter what their interests are. Everybody has a more or less individualized plan of coursework that's best suited to fit their interests and needs. Obviously, access to cutting edge research facilities for the important science and work that they will do during their time with us in the university. Research and dissertation projects that push the boundaries of our fields with the potential for real world impact and that incorporate collaboration across multiple disciplines in chemistry and more and more frequently, very frequently in fact, disciplines outside of chemistry as well. An emphasis on excellent faculty mentorship that's focused on the development and maturation of each individual student. So again, not a cookie cutter mentorship approach where every student is treated the same, but rather mentorship and advisement that takes every student as an individual to give them what they need. And finally, opportunities to gain real world training and research experiences with an eye toward long-term career development. Okay, so the big picture by which our program works is summarized on this slide here. So in year one, students that are in our graduate program focus mainly on completing their coursework. They spend time figuring out which research group they would like to join, and then ultimately get started on a dissertation project and start devoting significant time and energy toward making research progress once they have joined the research group. In their second year, they will continue to work on research. They'll form a PhD committee. Students in their second year go through the process to formally become a PhD candidate and advance to PhD candidacy in our program. To do that, they will write a dissertation proposal and complete an oral PhD candidacy examination. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about what both those requirements involve. And then from year three, basically until the end of one's time in our graduate program, they focus more or less exclusively on their dissertation research, on the science within the research group, within the research lab that they're looking to push forward. They will complete a preliminary oral examination of research progress roughly 6 months before their PhD defense. So that's kind of like a little tune-up before the actual defense of the dissertation. They write their dissertation and then ultimately defend and become a PhD. So, when you look at the slide and you look at what I just laid out as far as the formal steps, right, the formal requirements that make up our program, what you find is that there are fewer things here than in PhD programs in some other areas at some other schools. And so we've designed our PhD program. We've intentionally structured it with a minimum number of formal guidelines, right? There is some structure here. There are some very important steps that need to be taken to ultimately clear our requirements and gain a PhD. But we've tried to minimize the number of formal guidelines to give our students and our faculty trainers as much flexibility as possible. Okay, and the reason we do that is because we want everyone that's involved in the PhD training exercise in our department to have the freedom to develop training and development plans that are tailored to their individual needs and their individual aspirations. No two students are the same, no two faculty trainers are the same. And so by minimizing the number of formal requirements, we think we can much more easily have individual development plans for everyone in our department. Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time going through some details of the formal requirements that we do have, right? So one are course requirements, and our course requirements will vary slightly for any student depending on their area of concentration within our program. So, and we take time over the spring and summer to advise students once they do formally accept our offer of admission and tell us, yes, we do plan to join you at UD. We take time before students actually get to UD and start their studies to have a conversation and figure out what set of courses make the most sense for that student to take, given the foundation that they already have and given where their interests lie at that point. And there's a website here that you can visit that spells out in a little bit more detail than we'll go through in this presentation, some of the nuances of the coursework requirements in our department. But in general, students need to take 18 credit hours, so that's 6 3-credit graduate level courses at the 600 level of above, and students need to have a minimum 3.0 GPA across those 18 credits. So basically an average grade of B across those 18 credits. At least 9 of those 18 credits, so 3 core classes, need to be taken within a student's area of concentration. So if a student is planning to focus in the area of inorganic chemistry, they're going to need to take at least 3 core inorganic classes, and usually that makes a ton of sense anyway. Ditto, right? If their core interest is in organic chemistry, they're going to take at least 3 organic classes. If their core interest is in physical chemistry, they'll take at least 3 core physical chemistry classes, and so on and so forth. We strongly encourage, when it makes sense, for students to take classes from outside our chemistry and biochemistry department, and that happens routinely. Science and dissertation projects within our department are highly interdisciplinary, highly collaborative, and so students take graduate level courses in the areas of chemical engineering, in biology, in material science, in biomedical engineering, in data science, and we strongly encourage students to take courses outside of chemistry when it makes sense for their dissertation project. Courses in which students might receive a C- or lower, those grades are uncommon, but they do happen from time to time. A grade of C- or lower will not count toward the formal degree requirements, so C or higher is needed for a course to count toward those 18 credit hours in the first bullet point here. And again, right, a minimum of a 3.0 GPA, a B average, is required for a student to be in good standing. Okay, so what kind of courses are students taking, particularly in their first semester and first year? So over the first 2 to 3 semesters, depending on a student's core area of interest, they'll be taking those 6 courses. We strongly encourage all the students in our program to try to get those 18 credit hours, those 6 3-credit courses, out of the way in year 1, in their first year in our graduate program, because that basically clears out the whole second year to focus on research that will go toward the PhD candidacy exam. In addition, if students get their core 6 courses out of the way in the first year, that also frees up a little bit of time in the second year to take elective classes at their discretion to extend their knowledge base in some new areas. All our students take a course that's called New Student Seminar, so they take that in their first semester, and that course is not for a grade. It's basically pass-fail. And in that course, the faculty in the department will rotate through each week and give presentations on the research projects that they are pursuing in their labs and research opportunities that exist for new students to join. So this is a way in which new students in our department learn about the breadth of science and the research opportunities within our department. Students will also register for research seminars. So each area of concentration, each special sub-discipline within our department has either weekly or bi-weekly seminars that are attended by both students and faculty. And there's a formal course that goes along with participating in those seminars. And we also have a class for colloquia. And so these are basically specialized seminar. Our department hosts several colloquia, which are seminars by very, very highly visible people in our fields every semester. Okay, I'll switch gears slightly here to talk about teaching assistantships and research assistantships. So when new graduate students join our program, for the most part, unless they have some kind of fellowship or in a specialized training program, they will serve as teaching assistants, and that teaching assistantship will provide the basis for their stipend and tuition waiver. Students that do serve as TAs lead either labs or recitation and discussion sections. The majority of students within our doctoral program at any given time are not supported by TA positions. They're supported by research assistantships. And so typically after a student's first year or sometimes in the middle or toward the end of their second year, really depending on that student's advisor's funding situation, they're generally moved on to an RA position, which means that the student gets a stipend basically for solely focusing on their PhD research. The goal of our department is, in general, to move all our students from TA positions onto RA positions by the end of the second year in our program, basically by the time they are advancing to PhD candidacy and focusing on research full-time. As far as funding goes, our graduate stipend for the 2021-2022 year is set to be $28,500 for all our students that are in good standing. Importantly, our stipends are not static. So our stipends historically go up by about $500 a year. Now, there's variability there. Sometimes it goes up by more than that, sometimes a little bit less than that. But in general, for a roughly 5-year PhD student, their stipend, by the time they're nearing the completion of their time in our program after 5 years, they should expect that their stipend is probably going to be $2,500 to $3,000 higher than when they joined us, based on the rate at which we make raises to the stipend. An important point is that when we do raise the stipend, which we try to do every year, that raise applies to all students in our program. So I know that there are some programs and some fields where raises are given every year, but when a student is quoted a stipend, when they enter their program, that is essentially the stipend that they get for every year that they are in the program. So if there are raises in subsequent years, they're not pushed out to students that have already been in the program a few years. That is not the case for us. When we make a raise, when our stipend goes up, it's every student in the program, no matter if they've been here 1 year, no matter if they're just joining, no matter if they're in their 5th year and finishing up their degree. Everybody gets that raise. Another important point is that our stipend is uniform across both TA and RA contracts. So, there are also some programs where a TA rate might be a little bit lower than an RA rate. That's not the case here either. All students get the same stipend, regardless of whether they're on a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship. And we guarantee funding to all students who are in good standing for at least 5 years in their program. that's not to say that if a student takes more than 5 years to get their degree, they will lose funding. That has not happened during my time as associate chair or at any point to my knowledge, frankly. But the guarantee is for 5 years at the very least. So you can feel secure in the stipend you're getting and that you will continue to receive it should you join our program. Okay, so just to summarize that funding in good standing, our department guarantees academic year support for 5 years for students who, and these are the technical criteria for a student to be in good standing, of which, at any given time, virtually 100% of our students are full-time students and making progress toward their PhD degree, are an approved research group. Once we're past the first semester of a student's PhD, time in our PhD program. And there are some caveats there. If a student is in a special training program or a special fellowship program, such as our chemical biology interface program, there are cases where it might take a little bit longer for them to be in an approved research group, and that's fine. That's not an issue. International students need to meet international TA requirements if they're non-US citizens. Students must have a cumulative 3.0 GPA in coursework. Students need to advance to PhD candidacy by the end of their 4th semester in residence, have adequate TA evaluations if they are teaching, and otherwise be in good standing. Now, I know there are a lot of bullet points there, seemingly a lot of ways where one can lose their good standing. This is just sort of to lay everything out. The way our program works, the way the lines of communication between the director of graduate studies and our students' work is that if it looks like there could be an issue, we communicate that well in advance to try to head that off. We admit students to our program because we believe in them. We're confident that they have what it takes to succeed with us, and we ultimately want them to succeed with us. So our goal is not to bounce students from good standing and pull their stipends. And this generally does not happen with any regular frequency. Okay, another incredibly important point of focus during the students' first year and really the first semester in our program are the efforts to identify a research group in which they will pursue their doctoral work, their dissertation work. And we have a few mechanisms to help students figure out which research groups are pursuing projects that they will find interesting and which research faculty might be good matches as potential trainers and mentors going forward. And those mechanisms are, one, that new student seminar course that I talked about, right? So faculty will come through on a rotating basis and give roughly 30-minute presentations on the science that their group is pushing forward, and then specific research opportunities that exist in the group that are open for new students. Students are encouraged to attend group meetings of any and all research labs that are pursuing science that could be of interest to them. And then finally, students need to have at least 3 one-on-one meetings with potential faculty advisors, essentially with faculty members with whom they would work and be mentored. And they must have at least 3 of these meetings. We encourage them to have as many as they can, frankly, to meet with any faculty member whose research is of any interest to them. As they go through this general process in the first semester, students will submit their preferences for research advisor to our department chair, generally by the end of October, roughly by Halloween. And so they'll just fill out a form that indicates rank order of the top 3 choices for research groups they would like to join. So, my first choice of research advisor is Professor X, my second choice is Professor Y, my third choice is Professor Z. All the forms get turned in, our department compiles all the results, and then all the faculty in our department will meet to discuss the wishes of all the first year students and figure out how to do the best job we can in making placements. And group assignments are typically released. Students are notified as far as who their official research advisor will be, which research group they will join, roughly 2 weeks after that. So just before Thanksgiving or thereabouts. Now, our goal is to place as many students into their top choice as possible. And we are typically very, very successful at being able to do this. I would say that in any given year, 90+% of our first year students will get to work with their top choice of research advisor. Of those that don't, the overwhelming majority will get their second choice. And every once in a while, just because there's a number crunch and some people, some faculty might be very popular in a given year, someone might get their third choice. Importantly, right, our goal is never to shoehorn, to force a student into a group in which they really don't necessarily have interest, because that's not a productive outcome for anyone. It's not healthy for the student, and it's not a particularly good situation for the faculty advisor or the research group either. So if there is an issue, rather than just make an assignment and let the student know where they're ending, there might be another conversation. But again, this happens very, very infrequently. 90+% of students receive their top choice of research advisor, and the overwhelming majority that don't get their top choice do get their second choice. Okay, so after a student's first year in our doctoral program, they've gotten their coursework out of the way, or at least the vast majority of it. They've joined a research group. They've got started doing on a dissertation project. They will then form their PhD committee. And so the PhD committee is comprised of a student's PhD advisor, their faculty mentor, another faculty member from within our department that is within the same area of concentration as a student that a student is working in, a faculty member from the department who is outside the student's specific area of concentration, just to give a little bit of breadth, scientific breadth to the committee, and then a PhD member from outside our chemistry and biochemistry department. And so that can be a professor or a faculty member from some other department at UD. That's very, very common. A faculty member from another university anywhere in the world, or someone who's not in academia at all, someone who's in a national lab setting, or someone in industry whose expertise and maybe work in industry is well aligned and germane to the student's dissertation project. Other members to the PhD committee can be added as well. PhD committee can have as many faculty members as a student would like, but that's sort of the bare bones there, those three faculty members. A student will have at least three, most students only have three, but at least three committee meetings during their time in our program. They will have a PhD candidacy exam in their second year. Ideally, that happens before the start of the fourth semester, but it has to take place and be cleared in a student's second year in our program. A preliminary oral examination of research progress, roughly 6 months prior to a student's PhD defense. So that's basically like a tune-up for the defense. And then the PhD dissertation defense at the very end. And students always have a right to call a committee meeting at any other point if they wish, other than the 3 bullet points that you see on this slide. But the way things typically work in our department is that the collegiality is quite high. The communication of students with the faculty that are on their PhD committee is generally not an issue, and so it's the norm for if a student needs the perspective of a faculty member on their PhD committee, that they'll just send them an email or swing by their office and get what they need in that way, rather than having to call a formal meeting. Okay, so once a student is in a research group, started a dissertation project, they form their PhD committee, right? Then the goal is to have that go through the process to become a PhD candidate and expand their dissertation study. So this needs to happen, as I said, before a student's fourth semester of study in our program, and it requires several steps, okay? The first step, of course, is to fulfill all course requirements, obtain that cumulative GPA of at least 3.0, and then complete a PhD candidacy examination to expand PhD study. And that process consists of an oral presentation and an examination and a written dissertation proposal, okay? The written dissertation proposal is the step that happens first, okay? And in that document, which is 10 pages in length, a student will outline their proposed dissertation research. They'll define 2 to 3 research aims, one of which will be independently conceived by the student themselves, right? So that research aim, is not something completely unrelated to what they've been working on in their research group. Quite the opposite, right? That research aim concerns their dissertation project. It might be something that they wind up doing once they reach PhD candidacy. But that independent aim is simply some aspect of their research, some objective of research germane to their PhD project that they haven't necessarily discussed with their PhD advisor to that point. Depending on a student's given PhD committee and their area of concentration, appendices might be needed. So basically an appendix that includes experimental data or a write-up of synthetic procedures. And a student should talk to their PhD committee, right? There should be open lines of communication as far as what the expectations are with respect to appendices before this document is turned in. The written dissertation proposal needs to be submitted at least 2 weeks prior to the oral candidacy exam, so they are linked temporally with one another. And should there be an area where the PhD committee thinks that the document could stand to be improved, provisions exist to allow students to rewrite the document once, so that they can rewrite once if there's something that can be improved. So it's not absolute sink or swim, right? It is a requirement. It is something that must be passed to advance the PhD candidacy, but there's also an element of feedback and training here as well. Okay, for the second step is the oral dissertation examination. And so the oral dissertation examination consists of a relatively brief, roughly 45-minute presentation that the student will deliver to their PhD committee on their proposed PhD research, right? And so within that presentation, the student will describe their research aims, the background of their project, why their project is important, review the literature that is relevant to what they're doing, etc. Right? They will also present a detailed description of the research progress that they've made to that point in our program. And they also get tested on general knowledge and understanding of chemical principles that are appropriate to a PhD candidate in the field, essentially to a second, third year chemistry PhD student. And the areas in which they will be examined during this oral part of the candidacy process, right, are going to be in areas that are relevant to where they're working, right? So for example, an organic student maybe that's working on a total synthesis project shouldn't expect to be asked in-depth questions about quantum mechanics, for example. Whereas someone who's working on ultra-fast laser spectroscopy isn't going to probably be asked how to do a 14-step total synthesis. So there's a balance, and you get asked questions that make sense based on what you're doing, things you should know based on your project. And finally, just like the written part of the PhD candidate requirement, provisions exist to allow students to repeat the oral part of this exam once if the PhD committee feels that there's some area where improvement would be good to see, right? So maybe a student does their presentation and the review of the literature isn't as in-depth as it could be. That might be one example where a student might be asked to repeat this exercise. Okay, so again, the big picture. In year one, students are joining a research group, they're completing classes, they start research as soon as possible after group assignments are made, and work hard to get their dissertation project going. In year two, they're working on research and forming a PhD committee. They write their dissertation proposal and complete an oral PhD candidacy examination to ultimately advance to PhD candidacy and expand their PhD study. And then from year three to the end, they continue work on their dissertation project. They'll complete that preliminary oral examination of research progress, right? The thesis defense primer, roughly 6 to 8 months before the defense. And that is just an exercise to make sure the student, the research advisor, and the PhD committee are all on the same page as far as the final timeline, that final 6 to 8 month timeline, what needs to be finished for the thesis to be fully done and for the PhD to be complete. And then the dissertation gets written, the final defense takes place, and that is the end of our PhD process. So just to emphasize this again, right? This program doesn't have a lot of formal requirements, not a ton of specific hoops that students need to jump through. Right? We want our program to be flexible. We want faculty mentors and the students that they work with and train to have the freedom and the flexibility to develop training plans that are tailored to the development that each specific student needs to undertake to get where they want to go. Okay, so we hit all the main points as far as the basic structure and the timeline for our PhD program in this presentation. If you want more information, more detailed information, you can visit our departmental website, which is at www.chem.udel.edu. And under the graduate tab here, there'll be a number of websites under that pull down that provide more information and details about our graduate program. A second site that might be of value is this site here, this udel.edu/chem-grad-recruiting, which provides lots of information about the structure of our program. That's under program overview. It also has a ton of information about the resources, the research, the people that make up our department, and about our capabilities. And so I invite you to click these buttons, see the content under each of these links, and learn more that way. And finally, if there's anything that isn't clear that we can help provide details on, you can always feel free to reach out to any faculty in our department, and certainly to me as the Associate Chair of Graduate Studies, or anyone else in our administrative office to get any information that you need. Take care.